Welcome to the Indie KidLit podcast. Join Marty Dumas and Elena Page on their quest to help children's and middle grade authors find the right audience and sell more books.
Hi, and welcome to the Indie KidLit podcast. I'm Marty Dumas.
And I'm Elena Page. And today we're joined with a wonderful indie author, Tara Ellis. Tara grew up on sci-fi and has since found a love for conspiracy theories, close to my heart. This background, combined with a wild imagination, has led to the Forgotten Origins trilogy. The first book in that series, Infected, my God, I love that name. I'm infected at the moment, in case you're wondering, was a finalist in the Ian 2015 Book of the Year Awards and voted as top 50 indie books of 2014. Her ongoing middle grade mystery series, The Samantha Wolf Mysteries, has hit the bestseller status on Amazon in the children's detective story genre several times and continues to grow in popularity. Welcome to the show, Tara.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So, tell us a little bit about your series and how you've gotten started, how long you've been doing it, and sort of key aspects of your journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, pretty much everything, Elena says. Just tell us everything.
Everything. Okay. Well, and since you had told me before that I'm primarily talking to other authors, so I want to focus a little bit on my self-publishing journey and what that has encompassed. And it's still an ongoing journey. I feel like I'm only partway through it.
Mm-hmm.
So it started, as far as with the online actual publishing part of it, about over 3 years ago now, 4 years. So I think it was 2013 that I first published Infected, which is the first book in the series. And I actually just sold my last personal copy of that a few weeks ago, but I've got the cover here. Can you see that?
Nice.
Very nice.
So that's the first book in my sci-fi trilogy, is Infected. And then it is completed. This is the second cover. Heritage.
Great. This is encouragement for all the people who only listen to go to our YouTube channel. You should totally go to the YouTube channel.
That's right. Some of you are only hearing this, so I'm holding up the covers as I talk. And this is the third one, and this is called Descent. As you can tell, the covers get a little more serious with each one. The third one is the young lady holding a rifle.
Are they young adult? Are they young adult, those ones?
Those ones are young adult. They are still considered a clean read. I labeled them PG-13 because there is some violence, as you can tell with the third cover. Oops. Yeah. Third cover. But it's not graphic. It's more of a psychological intensity is really why I rate it PG-13, is for that factor. And also, I have to say that the young lady on the cover is my daughter, the model. I also do photography.
That is super convenient.
Yeah. In addition to writing, I do photography. Like so many other authors, I thought that I could do the covers myself. And my first cover that I had for my first book that came out in 2013, while it wasn't awful, it wasn't good. And it wasn't my daughter on the cover. It was like some clip art that I, put together on mouse paint. And that was one of the first things I learned, is that people do absolutely judge a book by its cover. And so I've redone the covers on my trilogy 3 times. And I found a great designer who I love, Mel at Mel Shell Designs. And she has done all of them. And what I did find, though, is that I could incorporate my photography skills. I don't have the Photoshop skills. I do have the photography skills when it comes to the images used on the covers. So my children's book series, those ones also incorporate photographs that I have taken of my models that I've used for Sam and Ellie, which are the main characters in that. I'll get into that a little bit more here. So I guess to recap, my journey started in 2013 with the first book, Infected, and that heralds back to my the talk of sci-fi, my love for that, which, you know, absolutely growing up, once I became a preteen and teenager, sci-fi was my favorite genre for both books and movies. And I go for the realistic kind, though, you know, Infected, I compare to a mix of, you know, Indiana Jones and The Host and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So it's a really involved story. It's an intelligent read, I like to think, and it advances into a what I consider a true dystopian read. And it is PG-13, but it is still what I consider clean. So I wrote Infected first. I went with an online publisher that was not Amazon and was horrible. And I didn't pay for it, but it was still, it just, you know, it wasn't a good platform. And in between taking my break from the first and second book of my trilogy, I got bored and needed to write still. And so I pulled an old manuscript off the shelf. It was actually quite old. I had started it back when I was about 15 years old, and it was called The Mystery of Hollow Inn. And I based this story on myself and my best friend Lisa at the time. And I grew up on Nancy Drew and Trixie Belden. So this is going back, you know, before preteen, before, I mean, I always loved Star Wars, of course. I was in kindergarten when Star Wars came out. So I've always loved sci-fi. But I grew up on Trixie Belden and Nancy Drew. For those who aren't familiar with Trixie Belden, Nancy Drew came out, I think, in the 30s, 1920s, 1930s. And Trixie Belden was the 40s, early 40s, I think. So it was, you know, a little later, but around the same time they were both popular. And Trixie Belden characters are just a little bit younger than Nancy Drew, and I think better. I enjoyed them more. But, you know, everybody knows Nancy Drew, and so that's why a lot of people do compare the series, the Samantha Wolf mysteries, to Nancy Drew. And there's quite a few, too, that do compare it to Trixie Belden that are familiar with her. It's definitely from a G to a PG rating, only because there's some scenes that are a little intense, but there's absolutely no language or, you know, anything that would be inappropriate for a young reader. I've got people that have read it to pre-readers, read the books to them. And I also have the first two on audiobook, which I narrated myself. And so younger readers have also listened to the stories, and they're totally fine. So I pulled that old manuscript off the shelf, and I had started it when I was 15 and originally finished it when I was around 20. So this is 26 years ago when I was 20. I'm going to be 46 in a couple of months. So this was a while ago. We're talking dot matrix printer for the manuscript, and old school, putting the whole thing in a manila envelope and mailing it out to the publishers that I found on the books in the library for local publishers. It was a long, labor-intensive process just to find publishers or agents that you can even mail it to, because you couldn't jump online and do it. So I mailed it out to several places, and of course, none of them at the time would even take an unrepresented manuscript. They wanted you to have an agent, and the only response I got was from a what do you call it, where they want you to pay them $5,000 to print 200 books. And that was the only response I got. I got totally discouraged, literally put the manuscripts that I had left in a shoebox and stuck it in a closet. So when I say I took it off the shelf, I literally took the manuscript off the shelf, dusted the box off, pulled it out and said, what can I do with this? I love this story. It's dear to my heart. You know, I love it. And so I rewrote it, and it's told in third person present tense, kind of omnipresent, primarily from Sam's point of view. And so it's different. It's not your typical third person past tense that, you know, a lot of traditional books and readers expect. I have gotten some, for the writers out there, to let you know, I have gotten some critical feedback from adults that have read it and say, I have a hard time getting into this because it's they don't even can't even really put into words why, but it's because it's not what they're used to. But the kids love it. The kids love it because they don't have that preconceived, what they expect. And what they say, and a lot of adult readers also say, is they actually really enjoy it because it puts them in the moment. It's like it's happening now, and that's why they like it. And that's why I like to read it, or that's why I like to write it that way too. For me, my story plays out in my head like a movie. And so that's how I'm describing what I'm seeing in my head and hearing in my head. And I guess that's how screenplays are written also, or third person present, for obvious reasons. And that totally makes sense to me when I discovered that. It's like, well, yeah, because for me, it's like I'm describing a movie inside my head. So anyways, they are written third person present. So it's a little different, but the kids love it. And I debated at the time whether to change that. And I tried because Infected is first person present. And that was the first time I had ever written that way, because that's what was popular at the times. It was a few years after the Hunger Games had come out. And I had just read the Hunger Games a year or so before I wrote this. And that stuck with me, that experience of reading first person present. I loved it. Writing it was a huge challenge because, you can only tell the story from that main character's point of view. So everything you're telling, everything you're describing, the backstory, the action, everything can only be from that one character's point of view. So it's a challenge, but I enjoy a challenge, and I feel it really stretched me as an author. And I absolutely grew, I like to think, a lot as a writer from the first book to the third. I think the reader kind of goes on this journey with both the character and the author. I think you can actually see the growth and the change in the writing style as I became more confident in my storytelling. And I think it kind of changed from getting more from point A to point B to experiencing the journey through it, if that makes any sense to you guys as a writer. That was a challenge, I think, for me, was that sometimes, when I went back and rewrote Infected, it used to be called Bloodline, the first book in the trilogy. When I went back and rewrote that a few times, I could see where the hardest thing for writing is actually getting your story out, is telling that story. And I think a lot of us, we get stuck in just getting those plot points told, but sometimes that's the challenge, instead of just telling the story, point A, point B, point C, moving it along, is actually enjoying and relishing that story in between. And bringing the reader along through that versus jumping over. And I think I got a lot better at that. And I've been applying it to my kids' books too, as I go along. And also the other, so as an indie author, our main mistakes are thinking that we can do our own covers and that we can edit our own books. Of course, those that have had good mentoring from people, or maybe they're just really smart to start with, I don't know, but they understand, going into this, that they need to have a good cover designer, they need to have a good editor. And if they're not computer savvy, then they also need to have someone doing all their formatting and getting all of that put together. And then marketing, the other 90% of writing. That for me, I have been learning that this past 4 years, and I'm still learning. I finally found a really wonderful editor this past year. I also have an adult romantic suspense series that I started writing. And I found her for that book. And so now I'm having her go back and edit the other ones for me too. The other books were edited by a couple of different people. My kids' books, I have a wonderful friend who's also an author that helped me primarily do the edits on these. But it wasn't a true technical, intense edit, and she wouldn't let me give her credit in the books either. So, so that's, the other thing is having a really good editor is so important. I can't emphasize that enough. It's absolutely worth the money if you can't afford it. I know that sometimes you just don't have the money. And that's how I started out too in the beginning of this. I just didn't have the extra cash to spend on anything. So I did what I could. And that's okay. I learned. I think I've learned, I've grown. The books that I have out there right now, I'm proud of. And I'm always working to improve myself as a writer in the books that I put out. And I think so long as I keep moving forward, then I'm doing okay. I think there's a huge risk of being too critical of ourselves. it's a fine balance between being able to take the criticism and apply it versus being just overcritical of ourselves and letting the constructive criticism defeat us and prevent us from moving forward. So it's a fine balance, and it's hard. You have to have a thick skin to be an author, a really thick skin.
Absolutely, like any kind of artist, right? That you have to.
Yes.
Not everybody's gonna love it.
Yeah, it's scary. It's really scary. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist and a control freak, which is why I'm an indie author, and which is why I try to do this stuff myself to begin with too. And so I had to learn to give up some of that control and trust other professionals could do it better than I can. So don't want to get too far off track. Going back to I want to focus on the middle grade books because that's, what your podcast focuses on. But I wanted to, just throw out the young adult trilogy. That's the one I started with. And the whole reason the middle grade series got started was because I got bored with, with taking my break. And so I literally pulled this old manuscript off the shelf and rewrote it. And then I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. And as I'm sure any other middle grade author can relate to, the money's not in middle grade, at least normally. For someone to actually make a living as a middle grade author, you know what? If you're one of the people that are actually making a living off of a middle grade, book or books, I give it to you because it's tough. I mean, this genre is hard. Even finding good advertising is hard because most of the, the online advertisers that all the other authors talk about and say, oh yeah, they're great. Not for middle grade. At least for me, I've only found a few that actually bring results for middle grade books. Do you want me to list the ones that I use?
Well, yeah, hold on. I'm gonna pause you real quick because you're saying so much really good stuff. I don't want us to not digest all the things that you're saying. So one of the things that I have caught, and correct me, because sometimes I catch what you didn't actually throw out. So fix me if I'm saying the wrong thing. So one of the things that I'm hearing from you is that one of the ways that you've been really successful is really taking your craft seriously, that you really are trying to grow forward. You're trying to grow with every book. You're stretching yourself and you're trying new techniques, even if they seem a little bit scary.
Absolutely.
And then here's the thing that I was like, we're going to put that on a t-shirt. That's going to be like our show mug right here. You said marketing, the other 90% of writing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we need that. Like I need merchandise that says that. So we're gonna totally do that. We'll figure out profit sharing after the show is over. But talk to us a little bit about what you have done in terms of marketing, and you can definitely feel free to tell us what you're doing differently for your middle grade than you're doing for your YA, because sometimes that point of comparison is useful.
Yeah. Am I jumping around too much?
No.
Okay, good.
Can I just ask before you say, how many books are in the Samantha Wolf Mysteries now?
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. Before I get into what I'm doing for marketing and why it's worked, maybe I should back up a little bit and just talk about the series itself, and how many books I have and how they've become Amazon bestsellers in comparison to why my young adult books have not.
Right.
BookBub.
I keep hearing that word. I so want one. I want one so badly.
I think I've had 8 or 9 now.
Wow.
So what magic sauce do you put in the little comments box? And because I've had a couple BookBubs, I haven't had 8 or 9. So then that's...
Well, and that's over a few years. I had a dry spell where I submitted over 50 times, and I was getting desperate. I might have offered up my firstborn. Okay, so marketing. I'm going to focus on marketing a little bit now then, and so I'm going to back up a little. I think I have a little adult ADD, and so I jump around a lot, but I'll try to stay focused. And if I don't, just smack me around and redirect me. I'm easily redirected. So going back to my middle grade series, I wrote book 1 in between book 1 and 2 of my young adult trilogy. And then I finished the trilogy and I was lost. I kept getting called back to my middle grade series, even though if you look at the genres and you look at what's popular, and at the time I finished the trilogy, Hunger Games was in the past, but now Divergent was a big thing, and The Host. Actually, I got freaked out because The Host came out, I think, in between my second and third book, or first and second. And when I first saw the advertisement for The Host, I'm like, oh my gosh, it sounds just like Infected. But I mean, there's a couple similarities and then nothing else at all. But just enough now that I've learned as part of marketing, instead of getting freaked out by that, I grab onto it. For readers of The Host, you'll enjoy this one too, because there's certain elements that are similar, that are popular. That's okay. That's what works. And I certainly didn't copy anything, but there's a reason why you see similar themes in a lot of genres, is because, that's what people want to read about. That's what's popular. And the alien host kind of thing is a little bit similar to Infected, although it's a virus versus a parasite. So anyways, I'm getting, off on my little trail again. Going back to the middle grade series, I kept getting called back to this. The stories kept coming to me. I'm a daydreamer, always have been. As a kid in school, that was the biggest complaint. Great student, but, easily distracted. They wouldn't let me sit by the window because I would be, daydreaming. But I constantly have these stories coming up and going through my head, and I learned to just, constantly write things down. I told someone the other day that I handwrite my story ideas and my outlines and everything, because it works better for me, the process from brain to pen if I'm writing it. Most of my notebooks that I have are either wet or dirty, because most of my ideas, they come to me when I'm in the shower, when I'm sitting in the hot tub, or when I'm out hiking, or driving. But of course I can't write those ones down, so that doesn't work. But it's at times when I can be still, and everything else is quiet. I know in the shower I can't be interrupted. I live on my own now. When I moved my kids, I have empty nest syndrome now, so not so much anymore. But it's in the shower where you don't have any other distractions. Doesn't matter if the phone rings. You don't have your phone there. No one else can walk in and say anything. When I was sitting out in the hot tub, just relaxed and nothing else to do but think. And out hiking, of course, you're out in the wilderness, and I do a lot of solo hiking, and I can just be still. I just stand every once in a while, I'll just stop and just listen to the silence because it's so quiet. And that's when the thoughts come to me. If I get to a sticking point in a plot line, or something doesn't mesh, I'll go for a hike. And I know by the time I come back, I'm going to have it all worked out, and it's going to be great because I was able to just think. And the stories for the middle grade series, they just, they wouldn't stop. I had to write it. I just had to, even though I knew by that time that the money was in young adult. I can't do romance. I did a romantic thriller, but it's not a romance. It's still a clean read. I can't bring myself to do that. It's just not me. And I know if I were really going for the money, I would do erotica or straight romance, or, or historical. I'm not smart enough for a historical romance. But anyways, and my heart was with the middle grade books. And at that point, I was in a situation where I didn't have to depend on that for an income. It was more of a defining who I was. It's been about 8 years ago now. Just to get a little personal background, I was diagnosed with MS, with multiple sclerosis. At the time, I was working full-time as a ER technician. I was a volunteer firefighter, EMT, as a volunteer support officer. I taught CPR, first aid, at 4 different places. I had 2 different pagers that could go off at any time, as a firefighter or as a support officer. And I had 2 kids in school and a husband. And so I was being pulled. But that's how I like to be busy. I've always liked to be busy, but I kind of had the hammer fall on me with that. And I didn't have a whole lot of severe symptoms, but mostly some neurological stuff going on. And so I had to pull back. And I also had some physical stuff. I had a surgery on my shoulder and then on my hip. I have my joints easily dislocate, which don't go along well with crawling around with a air pack on your back and climbing ladders and stuff. So anyways, long story short, I physically wasn't able to respond as a firefighter anymore, which up to that point in my life was a huge part of defining who I was. You know, I was an EMT and I was a firefighter and instructor and of course mom and wife and before all that. But I hadn't written in a long time. At that point, I was, so busy with everything else. And the things that defined me aside from a parent was, all the emergency responder stuff. And then, bam, couldn't do it anymore. And so I pulled back in hours, eventually quit working as an ER tech. And I wasn't able to respond as a firefighter anymore. So I lost my EMT certification. I was still doing some part-time work and teaching CPR, and I started my own CPR first aid business. So I was still doing a few things, but I was a little bit lost. And as far as just kind of self-worth, and that's the main reason I turned to my writing, because that had been reading and writing was always my escape growing up. Thank goodness I had that, as a healthy form of escapism. Things are bad or seem really, bleak. Read Trixie Belden. It always made me feel good. It was a healthy form of escapism. And that was my goal with this series, is to offer that same thing to kids nowadays. I mean, even more now than when I was a child, to find a healthy escape from everything out there, I think is just so important. And so when I turned back to my writing to kind of redefine myself and give myself something to look forward to and some self-worth, writing was just kind of natural. And I was amazed to find out that I even had the option of being self-published, of being able to put it on the internet myself. I didn't even know that was possible. So when I started this journey, I knew nothing about that. I knew how to use Word for Windows and Excel, but I didn't know anything about formatting for a ebook or for a paperback. And so I'm self-taught on all of that. When it came to doing the audiobooks, I've done some theater before, and I've always been, dramatic and been into all of that, but I've never used one of these microphones before. So it came down to me getting on ACX, which of course is another subsidiary of Amazon, as is Create Space for paperbacks. And I watched their videos and their how-tos, and I went out and bought this microphone. Everything else was free. And I made my own audiobooks. And so I'm self-taught on all of that stuff. But my motivation behind that is it's what I love. It's my passion. And it's also, I feel like my calling. In addition to being a emergency, medical responder, that is something that is, the writing has always been a part of who I am. And so I just naturally turned to that when I needed it. And
yeah, and it sounds like when you were taking care of people's bodies physically, like as an emergency responder, when you were no longer able to do that it's sounds like you've kind of turned to being able to take care of people's minds. I love this phrase that you've used, the healthy form of escapism, that it's
Yes.
giving people kind of a refuge, a place to go inside of themselves, inside
Yes.
of a book, when they are in need of that. So like that is I can't tell you how many authors talk to who can't pinpoint their mission in that way, that you're providing a healthy form of escapism. Has that helped you with your marketing?
I think it has. I think anytime a person who is faced with a professional presentation or marketing, whether it be a book or an album or a clothing line. I think that if you're struggling with understanding yourself and what motivates you and your reason and your goal behind that, you're going to have a tough time doing well at it. Because if you don't really understand yourself or know who you are, how do you expect your audience to? And if you don't know who you're trying to reach or how you're trying to reach them, they're going to have a hard time doing it. And so I think one of the reasons why I'm, finding somewhat success with finding my audience and marketing my books. I mean, yeah, there's Nancy Drew, and I don't want to say, I'm piggybacking on that, but it's something that I can compare it to legitimately. When you say that, you automatically know, most people anyways, who and what it is. And I actually have had on Goodreads, when you talk about Goodreads with an author, they've either had really good experience or it's like, no, not Goodreads. I've had actually a good experience. I mean, there's the bad is always going to be in that, but so long as you approach it more as a reader versus a writer and actively participate in it, in a honest and a legitimate way, I think it can be an excellent experience. But you're going to get some honesty, and you're going to get, trolls aside, there's a ton of trolls, of course, on Goodreads, but there's a lot of honest readers, and they're going to give you that honest feedback that you say you want, but you're terrified to get. Well, my third cousin removed loved the book. Or my mom's honest. My mom loves it. She's going to tell me if something's bad. But I tell you, the first time you have a few thousand downloads on an ebook, it is absolutely terrifying. But if you really actually want some honest feedback, Goodreads is a really, really, really good place to get it. And I got some critical stuff from there, and it was wonderful. It was amazing. I was like crying and happy at the same time, because it's like, I knew there was something wrong with that. Why didn't anybody tell me? But it's like, wait a minute. Now I know what I need to change. And that doesn't, mean that every single person that criticizes you is right. But if you're getting a general consensus about something, you really need to look at that, and you need to explore it, and you need to seek out some other good advice, maybe amongst some other authors that you can trust to be honest with you. I don't need any hand holding and back patting. I need some, I always love to have good, honest feedback so that I can improve or fix something if it's wrong. So Goodreads is a good place for that. And
so do you actually take that information and revise your manuscript? Like when you come across a thing that you're like, you know what? You're right. Like this would have made this so much better, or this makes way more sense, or this is the piece that was missing that I kind of felt before. Or do you take that information and like hold it to move forward, like hold it in your toolbox to move forward for the next thing that you're working on?
I've done both. I have had the horrible, oh my goodness, moment where you get a review and they actually list the page numbers for your typos. And I had a reviewer that, okay, so it was, it was a manuscript of over, 50,000 words. And they found and listed the 3 typos that they found. And my first reaction is, are you kidding me? And they reduced 1 star for it too. I said, are you kidding me? I found 6 errors in the first 30 pages of Divergent. And, you're going to reduce a star for the 3. Wait a minute. Wait. Let me open up my manuscript. I'm going to change. They were right. 2 of the 3 were wrong. I fixed them and I uploaded the corrected version. I'm like, you know what? I'm glad they told me, because now it's fixed. And as a reader, it's totally okay for them to review me the way they want to review me. And if they want to reduce 1 star for 3 typos, more power to them. But they gave me something that I could actively correct to make my book better. So you know what? That was totally worth it. And it was honest. And so that's an example of taking something and immediately using it, I think, to make my work better. If someone points out a typo, I'm going to immediately fix it. And there's that part of you that wants to get defensive, but they're right. There was a typo, so I'm going to fix it. And then I've had the feedback, and it's not necessarily critical, but just an opinion of, oh, I really like it when the brothers are in the story. So in my series, Sam and Allie are two 12-year-old girls starting out, and they have older brothers. And I got that from several people when I had them in part of the third book. They loved having them in it. So I made a point of a couple of the other books further on in the series that they were main characters. And there were, a couple of other things like that, and just getting feedback saying, oh, I really liked this about the book, or I didn't like that about the book. I absolutely have applied that in the future stories.
So how many books? How many of them?
Yes, I have.
Tell me the number.
So I have 8, and you can see when I get distracted. Well, yes. So I started, with the Mystery of Hollow Inn, and for those listening, I'm holding up the books here to show them. But there's the Mystery of Hollow Inn, and book 2 is the Secret of Camp Whispering Pines. Got to have a good Girl Scout camp out story, right? And then the third book is the Beach House Mystery. And of course, I live on the coast of Washington State, so we got to have a little ocean action going. So the girls, Sam and Allie, they live in the town called Oceanside, which is on the west coast of Washington State. And so a lot of the stories take place in Washington, or the first story takes place in Montana, in the mountains of Montana, the Mystery of Hollow Inn. It's in a maybe haunted inn.
Have you used any of the locations in your books to help you with your marketing? Like, yes, do you sell a ton in the areas that the books are set in?
Well, in book number 6 is called A Mysterious Christmas on Orcas Island. I love this cover. And I don't know if you guys can see that. You see the ghost in red lingering behind the 2 girls. Can you see that? So Orcas Island is a real island here in the San Juans, and I had been there a few times and loved it. And so when trying to think up what I was going to do with book number 6, I wanted to use a locale. By now, I had caught on to the fact that that is a marketing strategy, that if you do have a local story, you can market it, to that place. The town of Oceanside is fictional. So, that isn't something really I can use, except for it's in Washington. Orcas Island is absolutely real. So I actually went out there when I was working on the outline. I went out for a visit and stayed at the Rosario Resort, which used to be called the Moran Mansion. The first mayor of Seattle built this place. It's a really amazing story behind it. They have this big, in Beauty and the Beast, the big pipe organ in it. They have one of those in the Moran Mansion. It's a real one that came over from Europe. And they play the Phantom of the Opera on it. And so anyways, I went over there and I stayed and I walked around and talked to people and investigated, trying to find real local legends that I could incorporate in the story. And everybody said the same thing, Ghost Ellis. And that's who was on the cover. And so there's an actual ghost story involving the Moran Mansion where I was staying about this ghost, which was a previous tenant of the mansion. And so I incorporated her totally into this story and the Moran Mansion. I interviewed the general manager who gave me permission to use him as a character in the story. I changed his name, but and he ended up being a hero, so it's okay. And so it's just a lot of fun stuff. And so they're selling the book at the Moran Mansion in the gift shop. And I don't know if they have it. Yeah, they might have it in one of the bookstores in the town that's also in East Sound. It's in the book.
Do you mostly sell your books online?
Yes, I do. I don't do a whole lot of in-person. I've done a few signings at Barnes & Noble in Bellingham, Washington, which is close to where I live. I've been invited up there a few times, which is a lot of fun. And aside from that, I've done a few street fairs, but I primarily focus on the ebook sales. And then I have a fair amount of paperback sales. That is one thing I have learned, is that with middle grade, paperbacks do sell more than young adult. So I've got the 8 books. Book 4 is The Heiress of Covington Ranch, which is one of my favorites. It's more of a personal relationship story. Book 5, another thing I learned from marketing, holidays. If you use a holiday as a focus in your story, then you can mark it to that holiday. And so I did The Haunting of Eagle Creek Middle School. I don't know if you can see that. It's like a spooky little, even a pumpkin on there. That's really like more of a Scooby-Doo cover, which I will say when I started talking about Goodreads, I was going to mention that a couple of the critiques I got was that a couple of people compared them in a negative, like it was a negative thing, saying, oh, it's, it's like a Nancy Drew. I think that's a wonderful thing.
Like, yay.
Anything that's been around since the 1920s and is still a household name, that's some pretty good marketing right there. And then someone said, oh, it was Scooby-Doo-ish or da-da-da. I'm like, yay, how long has Scooby-Doo been around and who doesn't know who Scooby-Doo is? So, I think that's a great thing. And then book 7 is The Case of the Curious Canine. Another thing I learned, put a dog on the cover. I love it. And then the last one that just came out is book number 8, and it's The Legend of Shadow Mountain. This is one of my personal favorites. I love this cover too. So
is that the last book in the series, or are you doing
for now? No, I'm going to be starting book number 9 soon.
So coming back to BookBub,
yes,
a little bit, and also like the number of books. Do you think like having more books in the series has helped in marketing, like versus if you just had 1 or 2, like comparing now when you have 8 back to when you only had a couple, does it make it seem like, wow, it's a really established series and it's, increase its popularity? And then my other question was, what do you think was the secret of getting the BookBub ads? And what did you get it on, like book 1 or, and then I'm also going to ask, since I've got you, is book 1 in the series like a perma-free, or is it like, we pay for it? Which strategy do you use in that regard?
All good questions.
All those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, in regards to having more books in the series, does it help? Absolutely, it does. With each book I publish, I think overall, it improves sales. And I'm also, all of my books are in Kindle Unlimited. I know there's a lot of debate right now for authors whether to be in Kindle Unlimited or be wide. And I've also tinkered in doing both and in the perma-free. So yes, absolutely, to the number of books in a series, the more you have, I think the better marketing you get, and the better follow through. But it comes down also to buy through.
Right.
Someone, if they buy the first one, do they buy, the rest? And I have put sample chapters. This is important with your ebooks. If you haven't already done this, if you got ebooks out there, for those authors that are listening, if you haven't done this, go pull up your manuscripts and do it. You need to put links. If you don't already have a newsletter, start one. I know. I put it off for a long time, and I finally broke down last year and I started doing it. You got to build a newsletter. That's just one of the big ways that you can market and get people to continue to buy your series. It doesn't really work very well if you only have one book, but if you're planning on making a living at this, if you really want to make a living at this, you have to do that. You have to keep writing books, put as many out there, quality, I'm not talking quantity over quality. They need to be quality books. You need to find what works for you, but you need to keep putting books out every 3 months if you can, because with Amazon, it's all about the algorithms. When you fall out of those algorithms, you drop like a stone. So you want to keep your book, a current book, in the 90-day release bracket, or you start to fall off. So if you can do one every 3 months, great. So put the books out there. Put links in your books. Link it to your newsletter in the front. Link it to your author page or your web page, whatever it is you used as your main landing point. Put the link in there. Ask for a review. Put the link in there for the review. In the back of the book, if you have a series or if you have another book, put a sample chapter. At the end of the sample chapter, put a link to that book. put an author blurb and then put a link to your author. You know, I put links to my Amazon landing site because I figured that's where people are going to buy it from. And one click is better than 2 or 3 because people are lazy. They don't want to click twice. They only want to click once. So that's the other thing. So put those links in there. You got to do it. Get the newsletter going. You got to do it. I have separate newsletters for my YA and for my middle grade, and I have close to 2,000 subscribers to each. That's not that much. I mean, most of the successful authors have between 10 and 20,000 people. How? I don't know. I'm still working on that. That's one of the things I'm learning. You can tell probably from my tone of voice that the newsletter thing isn't my favorite aspect of the marketing, but it's necessary. Do it. And so,
quick question in there.
yes.
Is your series numbered on the cover? Are
Yes.
they numbered or are they okay? Mm-hmm.
They're numbered, but they're standalones also. So they're a numbered series, but each story is a standalone book. You can read one. You know, you can read book 8 if you haven't read any of the other ones. You know, and I put that on my on the book description. You know, on the landing page for Amazon, I have on there can be read as a standalone, because that can be a turnoff for some people to think, oh, I got to go back and read book number 1. So, you know, you got to always be thinking about, you know, how you're going to pull people in. And that's another point too, though, the blurb, very important. Even if you think you have a good blurb, get other people's opinions, because that's one of the things. So now we can talk about BookBub. Am I right?
Yeah.
The last one is BookBub.
Yeah.
What do I think works well for BookBub? So I'm going to let you in on a secret.
We won't tell anyone, I promise.
Yeah. So one of, I think, the monumental, pivotal clicks of my author life was joining Clean Indie Reads. They have a Facebook page, and it's Clean Indie Reads, and it's for authors of clean books. And you know, it doesn't mean that if you have a book that's not clean that you can't join. But if you have a clean book that you want to, you know, it's not for marketing, it's for learning. And I joined them over a couple of years ago now, I guess. And I have met some wonderful, wonderful people that I have actually met in person now and am friends with. I actually even went and stayed with her in Wyoming, in Jacksonville, one of the friends I met online. It's just been an amazing group of authors, and I have learned so much. But part of that is you have to be open to it. You have to be willing to do a give and a take. Be willing to take constructive criticism and to learn and to grow from it and to apply it. And that takes a lot of work. I mean, a lot of work. I spent an hour this morning just going through my AMS numbers, the Amazon Marketing Services. I'll talk about that too if you want later, for what I use. What does that entail? Going down my handwritten list, and you could do this in Excel, but you know, I like to torture myself and do it by hand, and write out the numbers of views versus the number of clicks, the cost of the ad, how much I've spent, how much I've made in the percentage. And I've been going through and just writing those results daily for every ad that I have going so I can see what's working and what's not. I spent an hour this morning just doing that. So, I mean, there's so many different aspects, but I didn't even know about that. And I wouldn't have known about that if it hadn't been for other authors telling me about it, in this one group that I have found anyways that has worked for me, the Clean Indie Reads. And that was where I first learned about BookBub. Everybody was talking about BookBub, and I'm like, what is BookBub? What do you mean BookBub? It's only the largest, platform for advertising ebooks, I believe, on the internet. They have an amazing following that's primarily done through emails that are sent out to people that have subscribed, and why it's successful, I believe, is that their subscribers say what kind of book they want to read. They, select the genres, and so they only get emails advertising the genres that they want to read, and so that's why they have a high click-through rate. They are expensive, or people think they're expensive. It depends on the genre that you're writing in, because, for example, middle grade books I don't think it's expensive. It's $80 for a free ad. And I think they market to like 300 and some thousand people, something like that. But in comparison, I think it's YA, they market to like or maybe it's not YA, one of the other genres, they have like 3.5 million subscribers. So it depends on the number of subscribers. That's why it costs more. It's because it's going to more people, and it makes sense. And the nice thing with them is they have a chart that shows the number of subscribers, the cost for free versus $1.99. And then they also show the average number of downloads, which is great. And I think the middle grade average download for free books is like 6,500. The last one I had was about 10,000 free downloads I had on it. Isn't that scary? It's just, it's like terrifying as an author to know that now 10,000
Like
strangers
scary
have your
great,
book.
though, right?
It's scary that so the last book I had was the case of the Curious Canine, and that was just a couple of weeks ago. And so that was one of my, newer books in the series. And, since it was released, I'd probably had, I don't know, a few hundred downloads or something. I don't keep track that closely on those. But in a matter of 3 days, I had about 10,000 people with that book on their e-reader. And that's, there's just that moment of terror as an author at first thinking, oh my gosh, if you really want to find out if your book can hold up, that's the way to do it. And you're just waiting for the reviews to come in, and it's really terrifying. So that's the other thing with middle grade. Review rates are absolutely horrible, because if you think about it, you're really marketing to the parents who are buying it for the kids who aren't going to review it. And so if they get reviewed, the parents reviewing for the child. And so it's really, really tough to get reviews. The Mystery of Halloween I've had on BookBub a few times now, and I think I've had over 30,000 downloads anyways for The Mystery of Halloween. I have 70 reviews. 70. Wow. So, I mean, I have a 4.4 average, which I'm totally happy with. No ones. Might be at 1, 2. I don't even know if there's any 2-star reviews on it. But so, I mean, I feel like it stood up to the test. But it's really, really hard. Authors talk all the time about how hard it is to get reviews. You want to know how hard it is to get a review? Write a middle grade book. It's tough. But so when it comes to BookBub, though, I first started hearing about it from this other group of authors. And so I immediately, of course, started applying and was turned down over and over and over and over and over again. I was trying for my young adult books. When I first started, I think I only had 3 books in my middle grade series. And so I knew, the potential success and money and the factor that we, dream of as an author were with my young adult books. And I really felt like I had a good trilogy, and I still do. I still think that's my best work. But it just wasn't happening. And so I tried for like a year. I kept applying, and I changed all the covers again, had them edited again, and kept applying, and they still kept turning them down. And so I think at that point I had like 48 reviews on the first book or something. But with young adult, that's just not very much. It's a hard genre to break into, really, really hard. And so kind of on a whim, I said, I'll submit The Mystery of Halloween. And I think at the time then it had like 3 reviews or something. And I honestly didn't think anything would happen with it. And they took it. And I was just kind of like, what? They took it. They liked it. And I attribute a lot of that to the cover. I just love the cover on The Mystery of Halloween. I think, I showed it to you guys before. I'm holding it up now for those that can't see. And the girls, I took the picture of them, and then my designer, put it all together with the haunted looking house in the background. And I worked on the blurb, again with it. Mm-hmm. And when I submitted to BookBub, so some advice, always make your date flexible. Always make the date flexible. And if you do have any awards, bragging rights, as we call them, list it out for them, let them know how it's been successful, and if you think that, you know, it would appeal to their audience, you know, put that down. I honestly do believe, though, aside from covers and blurb, a lot of it's timing with BookBub. If you've been applying and they're not accepting, get some hardcore, honest critique on your covers, because that's number one. My understanding is their process is a couple of phases. The first one is the cover. So if they see a cover that's not professional looking or appealing, you know, they won't even look any further. When they're going through their pile, they're just, you know, they're looking at covers. That's all they're doing. And then, you know, if they see a cover that looks, you know, like it would meet the merit for what they consider professional for their, you know, for their subscribers, then they're going to read the blurb. And they're going to look at the landing pages. I think what they do, you know, they look at the blurb and the number of reviews and all that stuff. And then if that passes, you know, the criticism or whoever happens to be looking at it that day, then they actually read the book. What I've been told is they actually read the book. And I've experienced that. I get a download the day, usually the day after.
Really? I've never heard that. That's the first time I've ever heard that. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And they write their own blurb too for the book. For the ad, they write their own blurb for the ad, which I love. And I've totally stolen some of their stuff that they've done for my books. Yeah, I was excited with the last one. They actually compared my book to Nancy Drew and their blurb. Or they said something like perfect for those that love Nancy Drew or something. They actually, BookBub did that with my last ad. So that was exciting for me. I was like, you know, you've arrived when BookBub is comparing you. So I think with BookBub, number one is the cover and the blurb. And then, you know, you got to make sure that you have professional editing and formatting. If, you know, you can have an amazing cover and the first, you know, couple pages are really good. But if you haven't had professional editing done, if you have editing mistakes in there, it's not going to go. They're not going to take it because their whole platform is that they are promoting New York Times and USA bestsellers and critically, this is what they have on their website, critically acclaimed indie authors. So they're not going to take an indie book that's not professionally done. So if you have hopes of your, you know, your home done book, and unless you're a professional Photoshop designer and a professional editor, that's probably not good enough if you did it yourself. I mean, just being honest. And even if you are a professional editor, I know people that are editors and they still say that they can't do their own books. Because, you know, your mind, a lot of people, when you're reading it, your brain and your mind replaces what's wrong as you're reading it because it already knows what's supposed to be there. And so even if you are a professional editor, you probably still shouldn't do your own books. So anyways, just keep that in mind. You know, and if you think that that really does meet up to the standards for that, just keep applying. You know, keep trying to say different things. Don't be snarky with them. You know, you're dealing with professionals. And so I always think, that when you're applying, whatever you write, whatever you put down should be done professionally and in a professional manner. And it should, you know, if you're making in the little comment section, if you're writing stuff that has mistakes in it, so I tend to open up Word and write out what I want to say. And then I'll go through that and check and make sure that I don't have any typos and that I don't have any, you know, grammatical errors in what I'm writing. And then I'll cut and paste that into my plea. So,
No, that's great advice. I think Marti has left the building.
She has.
I think she's gone to pick up child from school, so that's cool. We'll keep chatting for a few minutes, and then I'm conscious of your time. But we've learned so much. So would you write another middle grade series, do you think, or are you kind of like one is enough, maybe never again? I know you sort of obviously perceive it as a bit harder than some of the other areas that you write in, but do you think you'll still continue to write in that age group?
Absolutely. I've already had several other ideas for other books. I have an outline in the first several chapters done for a standalone middle grade book that I'm going to get to eventually. I am going to get back to that and do that. I have a couple of ideas for some other series for middle grade that I probably will eventually get to, because while it is a tough genre and it is hard, and the only reason why I emphasize that is because I think it's important to be realistic with what you're doing and to understand that and know that that's what it's like. And but you know, like I said before, it is my passion, and so while I'm still going to be doing other stuff, that's always going to be my go-to. You know, I love the genre. And the first book right now, The Mystery of Halloween. Have you heard of Prime Reading with Amazon?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
So it's in it right now. It just started a couple of days ago. They put The Mystery of Halloween in Prime Reading.
Do they choose what goes in? Does Amazon just choose that?
Yeah. They hand select about 1,000 books to put in there. They ask you, you know, they offer it. I'm not supposed to discuss the details of the program, but they do approach you, which is like super cool. And they ask you if you would like to put this book into their special catalog. And so what that is, for those who don't know, it's different than Kindle Unlimited. If someone doesn't have Kindle Unlimited, but they do have Amazon Prime, they can read any of the books in the Prime Reading catalog for free. And so you get a lot of exposure, and Amazon markets those books because, you know, they're invested in it. And so my hope now with having that book in there, of course, is that the 7 other book in the series are going to sell. And I've already seen an uptick of sales in paperbacks specifically. Because like I said before, paperbacks do sell well for middle grade. So if you're a middle grade author and you have ebooks out there and you haven't taken the time to get them also available in paperback, do it. You're missing a huge market. Paperbacks sell in middle grade. And so the Prime Reading is like super cool. And so I have that in there. And so going back to your other question about that's another one of the things that we've heard a lot for marketing, is to either have the perma-free book as the lead-in to the series. And the reason why I didn't do that is because I almost did. I was debating it, but I would have to go wide. And with my middle grade, at least half my profit is in pages read. Even
I was going to ask that. I was going to ask like what percentage comes from it. That's interesting, because I've heard some other authors say that they don't do well in page reads with middle grade, and they've ended up going wide for that exact reason. So it's good to know. There are obviously kids out there who are being given that Kindle, you know, and Kindle Unlimited account, and they're told, go read, have a ball, that's interesting. So that's good feedback.
And maybe that also has to do with the genre. I don't know.
Possibly. Yeah, that's true.
And maybe that also has to do, though, with BookBub. I think that a lot of the BookBub subscribers are actually Kindle Unlimited subscribers.
Okay.
So I think that those that have gotten my free downloads, they go on to read the other books with the Kindle Unlimited program. That's one of my theories, because I saw a huge uptick in page reads after the BookBubs. And I did have the book set at 99 cents for a while. I tried it, and I just lost money. More people bought it at $2.99 than they did at 99 cents. And I have found that with my middle grade books, the 99-cent sales that I do are total flops. So I'd have a lot more success with free campaigns because I have a series. So for me,
and people can still buy the paperbacks, you know, like regardless, even if they're not in Kindle. We're just talking about the ebook anyway. So you know, yeah, exactly.
And another piece of advice for BookBub, are they like box sets? So if you do have a series and you haven't put any of them in a box set yet, do it, because you can also stagger that with your releases to keep you in that 90-day release thing that I was talking about. And people buy it. I'm seeing really good profit with the box sets that I have in my kid books. And then with my young adult trilogy, the only thing that BookBub did take in that was my box set. And I'll tell you, that was my best month ever. I was super excited too. And I had the box set with them for 99 cents.
Okay. And do you need to have reviews on those box sets? You know, that's what I always find tricky, getting reviews on the box sets versus the individual books.
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah.
But no, they actually took my young adult box set. I think I only had like 3 or 4 reviews on it.
Okay.
And that was in young
Wow.
adult.
Yeah.
They've taken my kids' books with only 1 or 2 reviews.
There you go.
I know.
Awesome.
Yeah, no rhyme or reason, right?
Fantastic. Oh, we've learned heaps, and it's been wonderful to hear about your journey, and we look forward to seeing what other books that you come up with.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that, you know, when you start a new series, that will probably just like up you again, you know, like it's every little bit, doesn't it, contributes to.
I hope so. Yeah, I have also a short story, true autobiography called Getting Out Alive, about a young lady that survived a plane crash, and another author and I have just collaborated and started this into a series called True Stories of Survival. And
Terrific.
yeah, she's from Australia, and her short story just released a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to release the 3rd one in a couple of weeks. And then the one that I started up to try to supplement my income, because I know that romantic suspense, I kind of got in the situation where I needed more money from my books, because I'm trying to eventually live full time off of this, you know, do it full time. And realistically, I'm not going to succeed at that with my middle grade books, most likely. And so in looking at all the genres and figuring what can I stomach, it's not that I'm against romance. I just need to keep it PG-13, if that makes sense. And so I started a romantic suspense under my maiden name of Myers, just because it's so hard to market in under the same platform with totally different genres. So I did that, but I did a short story lead-in called A Distant Echo. And then the first book in the series is Echo of Fear. And that's me on the cover, the silhouette. Because again, when I was I had a clear vision of what I wanted, and I couldn't find the stock art. And after spending hours looking for it, I'm like, I'm just going to take my own picture. And so that's how that came about. And so that's my romantic suspense series. And I was going to start the second full-length novel in that series next, but since The Mystery of Hollow Inn got into Prime Reading, I decided that I was going to do book 9 in that series first, so that I could have that out while The Mystery of Hollow Inn was still in the Prime Reading catalog, to capitalize on that.
Terrific. And Marti is back.
Hi, Marti.
Did you pick up a child and then come back and we're still talking? Is that what happened?
I did. That's exactly what happened.
You're like, you've come back and you're like, are they still talking?
They'll probably still be talking when I get back.
Yeah, because
I don't have to abandon the child or abandon the conversation. So it's fine. Everybody's happy.
You're the timekeeper, and meanwhile you leave, and I'm just like, la 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 la. Let's just talk forever, Tara. This is terrific. Oh dear. Well, I wanted to say, Tara, what's your final piece of advice to middle grade authors out there who are listening? If there was one golden nugget that you had to tell them in terms of how to better market their books and sell more books, what's your number one tip?
You know, I don't want to sound cliche and say never give up, but that's a part of it. And I think the biggest component of that is to always be looking for ways to improve yourself and looking for ways to increase your marketing, to increase your platform, and to reach your audience. And for me, I discovered that by talking and learning from other authors, and not even necessarily middle grade authors. They were clean read authors. And so I think, that kind of goes hand in hand. But you can't just write and then sit back and think it's going to just go out there and work. You can have the best written book in the world and nothing's going to happen, if you don't get out there, or, out there, on the internet, for me mostly, and just constantly keep searching for what is going to work for you. And also going back to, why are you doing it? What is it in yourself that motivates you and is compelling you to do it? Because if you lose sight of that, or if you don't have it to begin with, you're really going to struggle. So
terrific. And where can people find you online?
The best place to find me is on Amazon, because I am one of those authors that have found that's where my success is. I try to go wide with my romantic suspense books, and it was a total flop. And so, and I tried with a couple of other things. So the best place to find me is on Amazon under Tara Ellis, and also my adult books are Tara Myers. And you can also find me on Facebook under Tara Ellis author, and then also photography. I do photography.
And I'll put all those links in the show notes.
Great.
Marti, any final words? Where can people find us?
Well, they can find us at www.indiekidlitpodcast.com.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Tara. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. It's great meeting you guys and getting a chance just to talk about what I love. A lot of fun.
We're excited to have you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.